By the end of the day, Vesuvius was tearing open the sky. The people of Pompeii looked up and saw the end beginning. Families ran through streets that only hours earlier had felt safe. Stone roofs began taking the first blows from the mountain. Daylight faded, and the city turned to lamps, ash, and fear. Inside their homes, many still hoped the walls would protect them. Then the darkness itself began moving toward the city. When it was over, Pompeii had vanished beneath the ash. But to understand how Pompeii died, we have to go back to the morning it still believed it had a future. At sunrise, Pompeii was alive like any other Roman city, bright with voices, footsteps, trade, and routine. Its markets opened, its stalls filled, and its citizens moved through the ordinary business of the day. In bakeries, ovens burned hot and fresh bread came out for a city that expected tomorrow. Inside homes and villas, families ate, talked, and treated the morning as something completely normal. At fountains and crossroads, life flowed easily through the streets. In the forum, business, worship, ambition, and gossip met beneath the columns. And above it all stood Vesuvius, quiet, familiar, and dangerously easy to ignore. Then came the first small warning, a tremor light enough to dismiss. People began looking toward the mountain, unsure whether anything was truly wrong. Birds lifted suddenly over the rooftops, and the calm of the city began to break. Then Vesuvius erupted, and Pompeii's final day truly began. Before the ash, Pompeii was not a ruin. It was a living Roman city, full of people making plans they believed would survive the day. In the market, every voice belonged to someone thinking about prices. In bakeries, bread came out hot for families who expected to eat again tomorrow. Inside homes, parents spoke, children reached across tables, and the morning felt safe because it had always been safe before. At the fountains, people carried water through streets worn smooth by years of footsteps. In the forum, business, politics, worship, gossip, and ambition all moved through the same stone square. At the temples, people asked the gods for protection, not knowing protection would soon become impossible. In the bathhouses, steam rose, conversations echoed, and the city lived as if the day belonged to it. Workshops filled Pompeii with the sound of hands making, fixing, washing, selling, and surviving. In wealthy villas, comfort moved quietly through painted rooms and garden courtyards. In smaller homes, families lived closer to the street, with fewer luxuries but the same hope for tomorrow. Even the walls of Pompeii carried voices, names, jokes, warnings, and messages left by people who wanted to be remembered. At the gates, traders entered with animals, carts, news, and goods from the wider Roman world. At small shrines, ordinary people left small offerings for ordinary fears. At the amphitheater, crowds gathered for entertainment, because nothing about the morning told them the city itself would become the spectacle. From above, Pompeii looked alive, busy, confident, and permanent. But behind the rooftop stood Vesuvius, familiar enough to ignore and powerful enough to erase everything. Pompeii had lived with tremors before. Cracks in walls were not always warnings. Sometimes, they were just part of life near the Bay of Naples. So when a cup rattled on a table, fear did not immediately become panic. In the bakery, flour shook loose, Tools clattered and work stopped for only a moment. At the fountain, water trembled in the basin, and people watched the surface move without understanding why. In the market, baskets shifted and fruit rolled across stone, but the city had learned how to continue after small shocks. Animals seemed to sense what people could not explain. Birds rose from the rooftops, as if the city itself had startled them into the sky. At the temples, flames flickered and prayers faltered, but even the gods gave no clear answer. Then people began to notice something above the mountain. A haze, a strange shape, a sign that did not belong to an ordinary day. Walls cracked again, water moved again, and the unease spread from room to street to square. At the gates, animals resisted, travelers hesitated. The road no longer felt simple. Even the messages on the walls suddenly seemed fragile, like words written for a tomorrow that might not come. In the forum, business slowed as more faces turned toward Vesuvius. The mountain was no longer background. It was becoming the center of every eye in the city. Some argued, some dismissed it, some began to wonder whether they should leave. Then the mountain stopped whispering. Vesuvius erupted, and every warning Pompeii had ignored became one terrifying answer. When Vesuvius finally erupted, Pompeii did not understand what it was seeing. The mountain rose into the sky like a second world, dark, violent, and impossible to ignore. For a moment, people simply stared. The sound reached them first as thunder, then as something deeper than thunder. In the streets, market stalls were abandoned, food spilled across stone, and ordinary voices turned into panic. In the forum, officials tried to calm the crowd, but the sky was already answering louder than any human voice. Then the first stones began to fall. Pumice struck rooftops, bounced across tiles, and turned the air into a storm of ash and rock. People covered their heads with whatever they could find. Inside schools, homes, temples, and shops, the same question spread from room to room. Should they stay inside? Should they run? Should they gather valuables, find family, reach the gates, or wait for the sky to clear? At the city gates, carts jammed, animals panicked, and escape became slower than fear. Some looked toward the sea, hoping distance and water could save them. Others turned back into the city, because home still felt safer than the unknown. Every choice cost time. And above them, Vesuvius kept growing, turning Pompeii's final day into a race against a disaster no one understood. At first, the ash looked survivable. It fell like gray snow, strange and frightening, but still something people could walk through. Then it became heavier. Pumice struck roofs, filled courtyards, dirtied water, and turned familiar streets into unstable ground. Inside homes, lamps burned in the middle of the day because the sun was disappearing. Families waited behind walls, hoping the danger would pass, while the roofs above them carried more weight every minute. In the streets, ash swallowed footprints almost as soon as people made them. Every step became slower. Every breath became harder. And every decision became more dangerous. Some people tried to save what they owned. Others tried to save only the people beside them. At the intersections, the city broke into choices. Run to the gates. Return home. Look for family. Wait for the sky to clear. But the longer they waited, the less Pompeii allowed them to move. By now, the disaster was no longer only above Pompeii. It was inside homes, in doorways, on rooftops, and under every step. Families stood at their thresholds with bundles in their hands, facing the worst question of the day. Leave now or trust the walls a little longer. Some wrapped cloth around children's faces and gathered water before stepping into the ash. Outside, the city no longer moved like a city. It moved like fear. Some carried children. Some carried the old and weak. And some carried nothing at all. At the gates, escape routes became crowded, slow, and uncertain. On the roads, people turned back when the ash hid the way forward. At the shoreline, the sea seemed close, but not close enough for everyone. Inside homes, roofs groaned under the weight of the mountain. Every choice became a gamble, and Pompeii gave its people less time with every breath. Then came the phase Pompeii could not survive. Above the city, the mountain sent something darker down its slopes. It was not just ash falling from the sky anymore. The eruption had changed. What had begun as falling debris became something faster, heavier, and far more deadly. It was a moving wall of heat, dust, gas, and darkness. It rolled down from the mountain and pushed across the land like night had broken loose. In the streets, people turned toward it and understood too late that the disaster had changed. The danger was no longer only above them. It was coming straight toward them. Torches bent in the sudden wind. Doors shook. Roof tiles slipped. Columns disappeared into the cloud. At the city gate, the crowd had nowhere left to go. Behind them was Pompeii. Ahead of them was ash, panic, and roads fading into gray. On the roads outside the city, even escape began to vanish. The last group struggled through ash that pulled at every step. Each breath became harder. Each path became harder to see. Market stalls, homes, shrines, and streets were swallowed without warning. Places that had been ordinary only hours earlier became buried in darkness. Inside houses, lamps flickered against a darkness too large to fight. Families waited in rooms that no longer felt safe. Outside, the cloud moved deeper through the city. Then Pompeii disappeared street by street. The Forum emptied into silence. Rooms filled with ash. Rooftops vanished. The shape of the city remained, but the life inside it was gone. When the cloud passed, Pompeii was no longer a living city. Its voices were gone. Its streets were buried. Its final moments were locked beneath ash. It had become a sealed moment in time. After the roar, there was silence. Pompeii's streets were buried. Its doorways were sealed. Its final day was hidden beneath ash. The market no longer shouted. The ovens no longer burned. The fountains no longer carried voices through the streets. The footsteps, the arguments, the laughter, and the ordinary noise of daily life were gone. The Forum, once the heart of the city, became a gray, empty square. No merchants called from the edges. No citizens gathered beneath the columns. No one came to speak, trade, worship, or argue. The city that had been alive only hours before was now covered in stillness. For centuries, Pompeii slept underground. The world moved on above it. New roads crossed old lands. New rulers claimed old territories. Empires rose. Empires fell. Languages changed. Cities grew. Generations lived and died without knowing what waited beneath their feet. And under the soil, Pompeii remained. Not rebuilt, not remembered clearly, not truly gone, just buried. When people began uncovering Pompeii again, they did not find only ruins. They found streets, homes, paintings, shrines, courtyards, workshops, bread still left near ovens, jars still standing in storage rooms, objects still resting where hands had dropped them. They found a city interrupted, not a city slowly abandoned. Every room seemed to hold a final trace. Every wall carried the shadow of ordinary life. Pompeii had died in a single day. But because it was buried, it kept its memory. The ash that destroyed it also protected it. It sealed away fear, movement, work, hunger, worship, and home. And when Pompeii returned to the light, it returned not as a legend, but as a place where time had stopped. A city silenced by disaster, and preserved by the same darkness that swallowed it.